I'm not going to talk for too long, but my thought is I'll talk a little bit about how I sort of go about what I do, and the different, my choices of subjects and the kinds of things that draw me to my subject, and also a little bit about the sort of some of the techniques that I use. And also, but I thought, if rather than wait till the end, if you've got any questions, you can wait to the end, but if you want to ask a question as we go along, do feel free to ask. The show, as I'm sure you're all aware, it's focusing on 4 favourite locations of mine that are local. I do go off and paint in other places, and there are other subjects I paint a lot which I haven't put into the show, like woodland and trees and things. But I thought I'd focus on kind of Sussex by the sea very broadly. Brighton, I have in the past painted this seafront, but it's the North Lanes that I've been interested in recently. And then Newhaven, Hope Gap, which is a very long-standing location for me, and then Hastings, which is quite a new one. I suppose the first thing is really about the way I work. I kind of worked out quite a long time ago when I was at art college that it only really comes alive for me painting, and I've always been inspired by landscape in its broadest sense, anything that's outside really, with the shifting light and all the kind of richness that landscape offers. But I realised while I was still at art school that a tutor called Graham Giles, who I suggest you look up, very good artist now in his 80s, said if you're doing landscape you need to at least try painting outside, and that kind of got me outside. I've kind of been there ever since. And what I discovered is that before, when I was at art college and I was painting from drawings, it felt like a lot of the decisions in painting for me felt like things I could decide for myself. I could make this lighter, I could move this, I could do this. But when I started painting outside, I thought I'd sort of be able to work in a similar way. That at that time I was working very, very detailed with quite flat paints. But I found that painting in front of the subject, the painting made its own demands on me, and the situation of the light changing quickly meant I was being forced to work in a particular way, and that instead of it being what shall I do, what style shall I work in, I was just trying to do justice to this thing quickly before the light changed, and so it kind of felt more alive, less to do with me in a way, and more to do with doing justice to this subject that you kind of know is about to slip away because the light is slipping away. And so I found the whole process very alive. The light, when you're working in front of the subject, a lot of you've done this, the light, everything is in movement. The light is changing constantly, and it might be that the sun is moving round, so that the character of the light might go from looking into the light to the side, to the light behind. The positions of shadows move, but also you can get the more dramatic effect that a sunlit view becomes overcast. And then there are further changes that can happen. At Hastings, things can move, the tide comes in, all sorts of other things can change. And that makes it very difficult, but it also opens up a lot of kind of creative space in a way. It means that you can think, well, the light was like this, but I think I'm going to focus it on this, and you start to bring in memory and a sense of what kind of works intuitively. It's a dynamic process where you can mess it up very, very quickly, or it can come right quickly. Anyway, so painting outside all of these are done on the spot. So I don't do studies for big ones. I just do the whole, everything is done on the spot. One question people always ask is how long they take to do. And I once did a talk in a school, primary school, where that was the only question everyone asked. But they vary tremendously. Some of them, like the large one here, was done over 2 years, with over 2 summers. So I thought it was finished. It wasn't, and I had to wait for the season again. Some of the small ones come right in one go, but it's usually more. So they do vary a lot in how long each one takes. And because they're done on the spot, sometimes things happen that mean I can't finish it. Particularly at Hastings, I quite often came back to find a bulldozer or a boat had been moved, and although I tried to kind of adjust it, none of them ever worked. I abandoned quite a few large paintings because things were moved. So that just happens sometimes. So I'm going to, as I go round, talk about the choice of subject. Hope Gap, as I say, is one of my longest standing subjects. I've been painting there for about 25 years, again on and off. And there's a group of large rocks that have on the foreshore, which are made of kind of harder. They're a kind of natural concrete, but I've just been fascinated by this as a subject. It's got a huge scale. The forms are very sculptural, and the light is very rich because you get the rocks are quite light. The light will bounce off the cliff face and into shadows, and the cliffs have both a light white chalk, but also a kind of orangey clay stuff above them, which sometimes drips down over the chalk and produces this very warm light that reflects into the cliff side of the shadows. So you can see that playing out on this painting here, and also on this one, this very warm light playing into the shadows. But because they're light, they also reflect the sky in the shadows as well, and so you can see you get these sort of blue tones as well. This painting here is one of several where I focus very closely on the foreshore. There are some that I've done with no sky at all, just foreshore, and this one's got a very high horizon. I've done a larger version of this as well, which isn't in this show. It's an effect of sunlight, which I'm often quite interested in, looking into the light source. So the main parts of each form are in shadow, with a kind of fringe of light forming around the sort of where the light shines through seaweed and gives a kind of luminosity to the light. One of the things that when I'm approaching a subject, I think more about the light than anything else. Am I more inspired today by looking into the light, or the light behind or to the side? So you can see the contrast with this, where it's a low light from behind, and you get these blocky lights. Suzanne talked about objects being silhouetted in light, not dark. That's an effect you've got here with these sort of flat, blocky lights, as against the more kind of luminous quality of light in this one. In choosing the composition, the process of painting is a lot to do with problem solving. It's about working out but being kind of aware of what's moved me in the subject, something stopped me in my tracks, and then finding a composition that best gets that across. And I'm often drawn to subject matter in which there's a sort of delay in the process of recognition, that in the first instance of seeing the painting, I almost want it to because subjects that do this to me are what often stop me and make me want to paint, where there's a kind of feeling of being overwhelmed by by visual richness before you've quite been able to name what the constituent parts are, where colour and light kind of overwhelm you, and there's that little moment of where you're seeing it without it being made more prosaic as you give it names, as you say, oh, that's that rock, that's this, that's the cliff. Just that moment where you see it in a kind of more pure way. It's something that a number of landscape painters have explored. I think Bonnard, for example, often took his subject matter from the brow of a hill or from a doorway, because there's that moment you first see something when you see it in a much more alive way before we turn it into the ordinary, if you see what I mean. And by choosing a subject, or in a subject like this where the eye has to work a little bit to read it, there's a lot of forms which slightly melt into each other, shadows that join their object and so on. It opens up that space, I think, where you can have that sense of a kind of shock of recognition rather than just seeing things as ordinary, if that makes sense. So we'll go, or any questions about the Hope Gap? Okay, we'll go on to Hastings. I thought I'd focus. So Hastings is my kind of new subject, really, I started painting there because my eldest daughter moved there, so I started visiting, and we went walking on the. I've been there before, but at that occasion, walking along the beach, and the kind of wonderful. I mean, there is an order behind it, but the wonderful kind of visual richness and mess on that foreshore with these boats in different stages, and this one is not going to sail again. It's all wooden and broken, and then others are regularly taken down to the sea and pulled back up, and the all the sort of complexity of stuff on the beach, and in particular, I was very drawn to the bulldozers. There's a lot of bulldozers on Hastings Beach, and I think they're used for two things. Some of them are used to pull the boats up onto the shore from the sea, but mostly they use fixed winches, and the bulldozers are used to kind of flatten the shingle a little to make a channel for the boats to come up. And I've always really liked the way people improvise around things and make them more human. So these bulldozers new, and there are a few new ones on the beach, are kind of very brutal and kind of functional and not got much character. But as people use them and they put things like, in this one, a traffic cone over the exhaust to stop the water coming in. A lot of them have little plastic gloves over the exhaust, and things are kind of held on with string. In this one, there's kind of plywood, which for some reason has been painted yellow, that's nailed over all the windows, presumably to stop people getting in. And they become kind of characters in a way. And so, whilst a bit like some of my ones of Hope Gap are like that one I focused on, with a field of sort of visual richness, and some of them are focusing more on an individual rock as a sort of portrait. Some of these are like a portrait of an individual bulldozer, and you can see in these two different things going on, really. This is a painting that's done with very strong evening sunlight coming in behind me, and so it's blocky colours. And again, that idea of working to read the image comes out. It's got rust and different colours on it, which echo the beach, and and then I've composed it so that this line of boats behind kind of merge, that it doesn't give it means we don't have quite this clarity that if I'd say sat down and done it against the sky. So again, the eye works to see it and experiences it in a kind of slightly time delayed way. Then this one I chose to paint in overcast light. I should say when the light changes, I'm quite strict. If it's not the light, if it's the sun goes in or out, the moment the sun comes out in this one, I just put my brushes down and wait. So I'm quite strict about keeping to the light. And an individual painting session starts long because there's all the drawing out and then the build-up of the paint. And subsequent sessions usually get shorter, so I have a number of paintings I work on in a day, so I'm trying to concentrate the feel of the light. They do change. This one was painted in overcast light until the last session, when the sun came out and I had to very quickly change everything. This one, I was really attracted by this green tarpaulin, which seemed to me like a kind of, in a kind of funny way, like a beautiful shawl, except it's a plastic tarpaulin around the shoulders of this. It just happened to have fallen off like that, and I really loved it. And so I painted that over several sessions. The colour is absolutely one of the things that draws me to a subject. I have to feel excited by colour relationships to paint a subject. And it's the way colours relate to one another that I'm drawn to. And in making the painting, the colour's quite a complicated thing. I'm not trying to copy exactly the individual colours in front of me, because as you paint, the more you paint, the more you realise that makes very little sense. How you experience an individual colour depends on what colour you've just looked at. It depends on whether you half shut your eyes and try and see the whole thing, or you zoom in on a little bit. And so what I'm interested in isn't copying exact colours, but trying to find a way that the colours vibrate against one another in the way they move me. You know, so that things are either softly against one another or strongly. Things feel warm or cold. So I'm trying to find that kind of relationship. Whilst the colours aren't completely off-piste, I don't paint the whole thing in red when it was blue. They are, my thinking all the time is this lighter or darker, warmer or colder? Is it a green or blue or a purple? I'm always thinking about the colour in comparative terms. And so in this, if the sun was out, you'd get these incredibly bright, light green moments and deep shadows. And I wanted the sort of softness of the way the different tones work against one another. So anyway, we'll go on to Brighton.
Can you send it up so you can see them?
So the North Lanes in Brighton feels to me a bit like painting in a festival or something. I have painted in festivals, and for a few years, Sarah, my wife and I, and initially with the kids, we would go to a festival called Shambhala in the Midlands, which is very out there, and we're not really. So I felt more like a kind of David Attenborough going to have a look at this exotic world, and I kind of feel a little bit in the North Lanes, like it's like the exotic, colourful, creative, lovely world. But I'm sort of just enjoying all that life and energy that it's got, and visually, it's very rich. There's a number of things about it. I think it was a poor area of Brighton, and the buildings are kind of quite low, which means a lot of light gets into that part of Brighton. these were mostly done last winter, so they're in sort of lowish light mostly, but whatever light there is gets in there, and the Brighton does have a beautiful kind of light because it's near the sea. It has a particular quality, I think. And then within that, you've got these very vibrant local colours. You've got, you know, buildings that are painted incredible colours, things like a pink snail sticking out from the side of a building, things like that. And so it's a subject I've really enjoyed working on. Again, you can see the same idea visually in a completely different form, that most of these take a little second to read. You know, that this one is got a lot of forms are broken up, and it takes a moment to sort of read them. The light changes very quickly in winter, so I worked on 3 of these, which I haven't put together, but they do go together. This, which is a kind of mid-afternoon sun. This, where we're into dusk. And then finally this one, which is nighttime. And it's the relation of the artificial light to daylight gradually shifting over. And what the skies, you know, the sky is still lighter than a lot of the buildings in this one, and then it swaps round. So I worked on these one after another, sort of put one down and start the next. Quite often when that happens, I overrun on one, and then I end up having 3 paintings of exactly the same kind of light. But these, I managed to keep them separate. It's a completely different environment. Obviously, you're in a really crowded place there, and people are talking to you quite a lot. But I've sort of got used to that. I even enjoy it, and I sometimes find I can overestimate my own painting when I'm there, because people are so nice. So it's only when you get home you think, oh no, that was actually rubbish. But anyway, these ones technically interesting to me anyway. I explored working on a grey ground, which most of the others aren't. They're mostly painted on a white ground, most of these paintings, which is unusual. Lots of painters prefer working on a colour because it's easier to judge tonal values. But I often find white gives a luminosity to the colours, but in some of these I experimented with a grey ground, and I really enjoyed it, and it's certainly a lot easier to get the feeling of streetlights having because there's nothing. You've got no risk of anything being as light as the streetlights when you put them on. It makes it much easier to get them to kind of properly shine out. One thing I haven't talked about is brushwork. You know, how what the relationship is between looking at the subject and where you put your paint on your brush, and then how you use the brush to make the mark. And I feel that that's something that actually on those occasions I have worked from photos, I've always found missing, is that there's a very direct connection when you're there between seeing a thing and almost feeling as you put the brush on that you're touching it, that as you apply the paint, it feels not quite like you're touching the subject, but a little like it. It feels like that if the light's skidding across something and you put the paint on lightly so it skims across the surface and leaves a dragged mark which allows another colour to show through it. Hopefully I can't immediately see an example, but there's quite a range of touches in this one, for example. Then it can feel as if you're sort of connected to touch as you do that. Or you might load up the brush very heavily for where the light falls, and put down a really big chunk of paint, and it feels like making light in a way. So the connection to touch is quite important part of painting. I feel that you have to kind of, it's not just looking and analysing, but there has to be a kind of emotional connection to what you're painting as you work. So going finally on to New Haven, there's a whole series of them here, but I thought I'd focus on this one. It's easier for everyone to see. This is an abandoned trawler that I painted. I've done a lot of paintings of, and I finally came to paint it one day, and it had gone. And I was quite upset, but also think actually, at least I can start painting something else now, because I keep going to New Haven and looking for and wandering around and think, no, I'm going to do this one again. And it was interesting painting in New Haven and hearing lots of completely different stories about what happened to that trawler, about how someone was using it. The last person to own it was doing illegal diving off for wrecks that were Royal Navy vessels, and it was impounded. And I just heard loads of different stories, so I don't know what the truth is. But in this one, there's a strong kind of compositional idea of a sort of perspective taking you round, and then this curve of the boat. And the impetus for most of my paintings is quite abstract in a way. It's to do with finding a relationship between shapes and colours and structures that I find exciting. And so the very first thing I do when I get to a subject is I viewfind. I spend a long time either like this or looking through something I've cut out, trying to work out what composition will work and get across what interests me. And New Haven has a particular challenge because as the tide changes, these boats go massively up, and I mean the amount of change of height is, you'll all know, is really big, and that makes it probably the hardest location I work in, really, apart from actual breaking waves and things. So painting there is a particular challenge. I tend to try and just practically, I work on all the structures that aren't going to move, draw them out, and then quickly draw out the boat and start blocking in the colours as quickly as I can. And then obviously I have to wait for light and tide to be right, so it can take a while. It's a bit of a pain, really. But in this one, there was a moment where the sun's out, but the things that are white are tonally a big jump from everything else, and I found that visually very exciting. And so as you're painting, you start to think, well, I think it's going to be about this standing out against that, and you hope that you can kind of keep to that idea. So that's what happened there. And you can see, again, the water changes enormously as the tide's going up and down, and again, just trying to find a relationship between the colours that works. So.